What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Next Gen Geek. I'm your host Darius, and in this video we will be reviewing the latest installation in the Marvel Cinematic Universe of Phase 4, and that is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I'm really excited to start talking about this movie as I recently saw it a few days ago, and I just wanted to gather my thoughts and make this review for you guys. And is this a movie I strongly recommend, don't really recommend, or not see it at all? That's how I'm going to break it down. So without further ado, let's just jump right into the review. The first thing I want to mention about Shang-Chi, as far as my expectations going in, is really I wanted a great, amazing fight sequences. That was the big thing. That was the big selling point for me as a fan of martial arts, as a fan of the MCU. Seeing Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings just from the trailers alone pretty much sold me on the fact that I'm probably going to be getting some of the best action in the MCU. And guys, in my opinion, this is some of the best fight choreography, fight scenes. I won't necessarily fight scenes, but really fight choreography in the entire MCU, in my opinion. Winter Soldier is one of my favorite MCU films, and I thought the fight choreography and the fight scenes in that one were amazing. But compared to Shang-Chi, especially since I like both the grittiness, rawness of fight choreography and fight scenes, like Winter Soldier, but I also like the elegance and almost a dance between in fight scenes as well, and that's what Shang-Chi, on occasion, especially in certain scenes, felt like. And I gotta say, guys, the action in this movie was spectacular. I gotta say, this is some of the best action sequences, amazing visuals, just absolutely stellar fight scenes. And I know I'm talking about fight scenes, but let's face it, it's a martial arts film as well, and I gotta give props to the fight choreographer and fight director, and even the director on these fight scenes, because I love how it wasn't a shaky camera feeling to it, and more or less a fluidity, almost like on a gimbal sort of movement with the camera specifically. I love how you can actually see the punches and the kicks and all the impacts, and they stay on it just long enough before the next cut, and I thoroughly enjoyed that, specifically just from an action standpoint. Now you're probably wondering, okay, you talk quite a bit about the action, which is really just a couple seconds. How's the story? And honestly, this is a really solid story in my opinion. I think this film does a really good job of letting you know who Shang-Chi is as a character, some of his internal struggles and what he's struggling with, as well as showing glimpses and even elaborating on his past, and even the villain Wenwu, the Mandarin, and how he reacts and how he acts and what his motivations are. And I'm gonna get to the Mandarin in a bit, but right now I think Shang-Chi as a character, pretty solid. I do feel as if some of his acting throughout the film was a bit wooden or stiff, only on certain occasions, but not too much that it took me out of the film in general. Simu Liu, I think he did a fantastic job in this role, in this character, and I really like this film on the premise of that this is an Asian American cast, or even predominantly Asian cast, but yet they don't harp or too much on them being Asian, and they're just telling a good story. And you know, hopefully us connecting to the main character, and I really do appreciate that, and I really do like that. Because again, we see that they're Asian, but now it's like, okay, who is this character? Why should we care about them? Why should we root for them? And I think they did a pretty solid job on that end. However, I do think there is a moment in the end, and I'm not going to say too much, but there's a moment in the end where I did question that, like, it kind of lacked the impact as it should, because they didn't explain certain things as far as how the Ten Rings actually worked, how they work, how they influence a person. So I do wish they explained that a bit more. And speaking of exposition, this film definitely was very exposition heavy, which is understandable, but at the same time, it does feel as if they go between heavy action set piece, then exposition dump, action set piece, exposition dump, and then the second act really felt like it was just a massive exposition dump. And I'm not just gonna say it didn't progress the story further, because it actually did, but it did feel as if they were really telling me and not showing me necessarily what was going on. And I do wish they took a bit more time to actually balance some of those things out. The comedy, I also have to say, Awkwafina is another character I was actually very worried about, because Awkwafina, she's a very comedic actor, she's a very comedic person, so I felt, to me, that they were going to lean very heavy on the comedy aspect, and they did and they didn't. And what I mean by that is Awkwafina, and to me in this movie, she did a really solid job. I thought she was really cool. I actually liked her character a lot. I thought how they handled her comedic aspects was actually pretty well done, and it wasn't too overdone, too over the top. It wasn't too crazy. There are some jokes from her in the beginning, or the first 45 minutes, that I don't think landed too hard, and they were really trying to do comedy. It's not necessarily that it felt forced, it just didn't feel natural. And I thought, again, this isn't for everything Awkwafina. No, I think how they handled her comedy was actually pretty well, pretty good, pretty spot on, and almost all the comedy moments really hit for me. The sister of Shang-Chi, I really enjoyed her. I really liked how they told us, again, this is where it does have a problem with exposition. They told us that, like, she built this, but at the same time that she built something for herself, but we also see it, and we see the impact on what she's built with other people in the surrounding area, and etc. And again, this film overall, I thought it was just a nice package, really. That's really how I can say it. It was just a nice, coherent package that kept you entertained throughout the entire thing, you know? And one of the things I really do love about this film is really the dramatic elements, them going deep into the family history, why Shang-Chi feels this way, why Wenwu feels this way. I don't think they did as much with the sister as they could have, but with Shang-Chi and the Mandarin, those are definitely some of the two standouts in this film overall. And because you get to see a bit of the power dynamic between the two as well. You also see Wenwu's side of his perspective with his son, his perspective with his wife. Because Wenwu's, I'm going to be frank, let's talk about the Mandarin. This is not the Mandarin from the comics. However, I appreciate the change they did with him that made him feel relevant, that made him feel different from the other villains, and that made him feel genuine and vulnerable. And we rarely see that with certain MCU villains, and I greatly appreciate that. To me, this is almost on the level of Thanos. Thanos, of course, had 2 movies to really flesh out his character. But Wenwu the Mandarin, they did an absolutely amazing job with him. I really like how they utilized the 10 rings. I know they're bracelets, they're not the rings from the comics where they're on the fingers. But I like how they utilized it really in the fight scenes as well. Like, this movie, it went from a drama and comedy in the beginning, and then the last act, if you're not big on these CG battles that Marvel does, again, I can understand that, but for me, I freaking loved it. It looked spectacular. It felt amazing. It was visually stunning, and seeing some of the Asian mythologies come to life really just felt wholesome to me, at least, because I like things like the Nine-Tailed Fox and dragons, and yes, I said Nine-Tailed Fox because you actually see some, and it's freaking glorious, in my opinion. But yeah, this movie, and like I said, Wenwu the Mandarin, Tony Leung is a huge standout in this film. They did such an excellent job with this character. To me, this is one of the best MCU villains we actually got, and that says a lot, considering there isn't a lot of really good MCU villains, unfortunately. Thanos is obviously a key standout, as well as Loki with the Loki series and the other appearances he's made throughout the MCU, and you see how he's changed as a character. Tony Leung's Mandarin, Wenwu, is right up there in my opinion. They did an absolutely great job. The premise of his story and why I felt it was so engaging was that it was a mixture of revenge and grief for him. You know, it's established in the film that he's been around for so long, and that people have thought of him as almost one-dimensional, or like he's only this just bad person who's a conqueror. But then we see a vulnerability side. We see a side of him that actively actually changed until a dramatic event happened that forced him to almost revert back into his old self. But you see that is not necessarily his old self just because, but his old self to in a almost redeeming sort of quality for himself, and in a way for him to progress further, for him to almost hide away how he truly felt, and he's still trying to stay strong even after the dramatic event that happened. And you see how that event impacted Shang-Chi as a character, why he feels a certain way towards his father Wenwu, how the sister feels towards her father as well. And you just see the dysfunction between them, how it's not completely dysfunctional, but there is a glimmer of hope between this family, and we also see it at the end. And this movie, I thought, did a really good job establishing a lot of these dramatic elements and paying them off to me in impactful ways. And like I said, this movie just did a really solid job with how they interwoven the dramatic elements with the action sequences. I do feel as if the second act not necessarily dragged a bit long, but like I said in earlier, it was very exposition heavy and they had to explain a lot, and then it did feel plot wise like it was trying to rush to the end. But then even when you get too close to that third act, it still was calm a bit before it was calm before the storm hit. But again, even those moments I thought were really solid. You actually see them training for the big battle, which I thoroughly enjoyed. It may be unbelievable when you see throughout the movie, especially in the end. But again, to me, it was them really trying to nail in the dramatic elements and at least trying to. Again, this is where I think the plot-wise and sequence of events it did fall a bit in this film, because like I said, the beginning movie, when I say it hit hard, it hit hard. You have action scene after action scene, dramatic elements, comedy moments, and it just really felt engaging in that beginning. Second and third act, I'm not going to say it wasn't as engaging, but it was taking more time. It almost felt as if it was trying to catch up to what they really wanted to do, which was explain Tala, one of the mystical regions and dimensions, right, with the dragons and that area. And it was trying to explain some of that, explain some of the it does have a lot of flashbacks. It really tried to explain a lot, but it also still felt as if it was trying to rush along and to get to the end instead of letting it simmer all the time. It simmered quite a bit, like I said, during some of the dramatic tensions and moments. It let the action scene simmer and we really stay on it. Like I said, it's some of the best action sequences I've seen in the MCU, and I absolutely love this movie for that. Coming from Black Widow, which I thought was a meh experience, even though I liked the beginning, but then it just felt like a generic MCU film that was trying to copy Winter Soldier but couldn't capture the essence of what made Winter Soldier so special. With Black Widow, Shang-Chi to me was a nice different feel and tone in the MCU, both mystically and even dramatically as well. And this movie absolutely met my expectations, if not surpassed it a bit more, because like I said, in the third act there is a CG fight, as people like to say, but it was anime-like, heavy as hell, and I freaking adored it. But it felt like it was anime done right. It felt like they could do Dragon Ball Z right, in the right way, live action, if you know what I mean. So, like I said, do I recommend this movie? I absolutely recommend you guys see this in theaters. This was an absolute blast to view on the big screen. I really enjoyed almost every single second of it. It does have its flaws, as I mentioned, like I said, with the exposition, some of the pacing, how it felt as if it was starting to catch up with its own plot, but then it kind of made some unbelievable segments that just felt very abrupt into the next scene and therefore after. But like I said, the martial arts, the comedy, it all hit. It all nailed for me. Strongly recommend it, because so far in the MCU, it's been a good experience. Not a great one compared to Phase 1 and 2, but a good, decent one. There really wasn't anything mind-blowing to me like Black Widow. I didn't like Black Widow all that much. WandaVision, I really did like it. I don't think I love it as much now, but I really did like it. Same thing with Falcon and Winter Soldier. I liked it. Loki I thought was okay. But Shang-Chi and Legend of the Ten Rings, this took my breath away. I really enjoyed the hell out of this movie. I thought this, to me, this showed a solid origin story yet again done right compared to Phase 1 of the MCU. And compared to Captain Marvel as well, because I do not like that movie at all. But Shang-Chi, Legend of the Ten Rings, absolutely great. Really, it was really good. Not great. I think like I said, some of the negatives I have towards it hold it back to being great. It is really close to being a great movie. But like I said, I think it's a really good one. It was action-packed, action-heavy, really funny. And if you've been wanting some serious martial arts and fight choreography, you're going to get that in this movie, if not even more. So, I strongly recommend you guys see this movie in theaters. Check it out on the big screen. Don't wait for Disney Plus. No, see this in the theaters on that big screen, because it is absolutely beautiful. And I absolutely adore it. You know, it still has its flaws. I'm not trying to say, oh, I love it, I think it's perfect. No, I do love the movie. I think it's a really good movie. But there are certain elements, structure-wise, pacing-wise, that prohibit it from being a great one. And it's close to being great. It's really close, in my opinion. But I still love the movie because I had a great time with it. And I was on the edge of my seat. And I was like, ooh, during the action moments. Absolutely love this movie. Highly recommend it. So again, if you guys have seen it, what did you guys think of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings? Let me know in the comments down below. And of course, follow me on Twitter at NextGenGeek to let me know through there as well. Because like I said, to me, had a great experience, and I hope you guys did too. And if you guys didn't like it, tell me why in the comments down below. Why are you wrong? Obviously, if you didn't like it, you don't like it. It's everyone's film, is everyone's own cup of tea, you know. So again, let me know why you liked it, why you didn't like it in the comments down below. Like I said, and I'll see you guys in the next video.